Okay, so you guys have really given us a pretty diverse set of stuff to go through this time.
Yeah,
But I think, we can pull some interesting insights out of this.
absolutely.
So we've got the 2025 World Happiness Report, some pretty big changes happening over in the U.S. Department of Education.
Right.
Looks like a couple of NASA astronauts had a longer vacation than they planned for.
Yeah, a little bit longer.
And then
9 months is a long time.
yeah, and then the very serious situation in Gaza. So kind of a look at global well-being.
Yeah.
And some really pressing events.
Absolutely. A really diverse set of things that are affecting us all over the world right now.
Yeah. So why don't we start with this World Happiness Report?
Sure.
So one of the things that they found is that happiness really isn't just about how much money you make.
Yeah.
It's way more about your social connections. Like,
Yeah.
how much do you trust other people? Are your relationships strong? Are people generous?
Right.
That kind of thing.
It really does make you think about the elements of a good life. I think more holistically,
Yeah, absolutely.
more than just, financial well-being.
So it's interesting to see Finland, always at the top of the list.
Yeah, 8 years in a row.
8 years in a row. Other Nordic countries are also right up there,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of shows that
It makes you think
those strong social support systems,
Yeah.
the high levels of trust,
Right.
are really a big part of why people there are feeling pretty good.
Yep. I think there's a strong argument to be made for that, for sure.
But then you see South Korea, they dropped all the way down to 58th.
Yeah.
And the report is saying that that's because of really low social trust
Right.
and something called death of despair.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty stark.
It is.
It's basically like deaths that are linked to like substance abuse and suicide and things like that.
Right.
It makes you think about what's happening over there societally that's leading to this kind of trend.
Yeah, absolutely. And they also said that globally, there's been a pretty big increase in young adults saying they have nobody to rely on.
Wow, 19%.
19%.
It seems like a huge jump from where that number was before.
Right. It really makes you wonder what's happening with, kind of the connections that younger generations are making.
Right.
Or not making.
Yeah, or not making.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about education in the U.S.
Okay.
So President Trump has issued an executive order to downsize the Department of Education,
Okay.
which basically means he wants to give more power to the states when it comes to education.
Right. More local control.
Exactly. So this is pretty big. We're talking about over 1,300 people potentially losing their jobs.
Right.
And programs for diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Yeah.
and gender identity,
Yeah.
those are getting defunded.
Right.
So that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot of change.
But the thinking is that even though the government's been spending tons of money on education, like $3 trillion, it hasn't really been effective.
Right.
And the states should be the ones making the decisions.
Okay.
But then some people are saying
Yeah.
that for such a big change, you really need Congress to get involved.
I mean, it is a pretty fundamental shift.
Right.
In the way that things have been done.
Right. Yeah.
And you would think that would require, some sort of legislative action.
Absolutely. All right. So next up, we have some astronauts
Okay.
who had an interesting trip.
Yeah.
So they were supposed to be in space for 8 days.
8 days.
Yeah, but they ended up staying for 9 months.
Wow. That's quite a difference.
Right.
That's quite a difference.
It is. And the reason is that Boeing's Starliner capsule had some problems.
Like with the propulsion system and things like that? Or
Yeah, it was having trouble with the engines and also with docking.
Right.
So they finally got back home on a SpaceX capsule
Okay.
with some other astronauts.
So there was some collaboration there.
Yeah, which is cool to see.
Absolutely.
But of course, everyone had something to say about it.
Oh, I bet.
So Trump was saying that the Biden administration basically abandoned these astronauts.
Okay.
And NASA's saying, no, it was all about safety and logistics.
Yeah, well, of course they would say that. I mean,
Right.
it's NASA.
Right.
They're going to be concerned about safety.
But it's interesting to see how even something like space travel
Yeah.
gets caught up in politics.
Right.
And then finally, we need to talk about what's happening in Gaza.
Right.
So the ceasefire fell apart.
Yeah.
And Israel is back to launching airstrikes and ground operations.
It's a really serious situation.
It is. And Hamas is saying that over 500 people have died.
Wow.
And then Israel's defense minister,
Yeah.
he basically said that if they don't release the hostages, they're going to completely destroy Gaza.
Wow. So the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really tough situation.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
wow. We covered a lot in this deep dive.
Yeah.
We looked at how happy people are all over the world.
Yeah.
We talked about big changes happening in education in the U.S. We saw how even astronauts can have their trips extended.
9 months.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we talked about a really difficult situation in the Middle East.
It makes you think about how all these things are connected.
It does.
Like when we see low levels of social trust in some parts of the world, could that be contributing to the kind of polarization that we see in, debates about things like education or,
Yeah.
Even international relations?
Yeah, it's a really good point.
I think it's something worth considering.
It is. So with all these challenges happening in the world,
Yeah.
how much does it matter that we as individuals understand what's going on?
Right.
It's a question worth asking.
Yeah, definitely something to ponder.
Okay, well, thanks for going through all this with us.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
Sounds good.